Canada, what just happened isn't normal. It isn't random, and it sure as hell isn't business as usual because overnight, without warning, Canadians in town after town walked up to something that they thought that they would never see in their lifetime. 7-Eleven closed, doors chained shut, windows blacked out, shelves empty. In fact, shelves are ripped out like the building had been evacuated during a hurricane. And within hours, this wasn't just a store closure story anymore. No, this became a nationwide explosion, a political earthquake, and the single biggest humiliation of Mark Carney's economic messaging since he took power. Why? Well, because everything that Paul Revere warned about, the food taxes, the carbon levies that were baked into your groceries, the sky-high fertilizer costs, the inflation that Carney swore was just temporary, the affordability crisis that he downplayed, all of it. It just showed up on Main Street in the ugliest way possible. In fact, the can't afford Carney movement didn't just trend, it detonated. And the 7-Eleven collapse poured gasoline on it. Families standing outside the darkened stores, prairie towns losing their only late night safe spot, communities watching the neon lights go out across Western Canada, kind of like a rolling blackout. And well, the messaging hit Ottawa louder than any poll or press conference. Canadians aren't buying Carney's story anymore. No, because they can't even buy dinner. But here's the part that has Carney's office scrambling today. The same hidden food taxes and cost drivers that Paul Revere had been screaming about for years, they are the exact reasons 7-Eleven's Japanese parent company said that these stores are no longer sustainable. So when a global corporation built to survive recessions, robberies, thin margins, and late nights says that Canada is too expensive to operate in, that's not a business decision. That's an alarm bell, and it proves point blank that Paul Revere wasn't exaggerating. He was predicting. So tonight, we're going to break down the truth that Carney cannot escape. The 7-Eleven collapse isn't the end of something. In fact, it's the beginning. A warning shot that the street level economy is snapping and that the real battle over food prices, food taxes, crime, empty shelves, inflation, and national survival has just begun. So buckle up, folks, because once you connect the dots from the food tax revolt to the Paul Revere Carney clashes to the convenience store collapse that Carney never saw coming, you're going to understand exactly why this is not a scandal. This is a reckoning, and it's happening right now. Hit the like button and subscribe. So Canada didn't just wake up to a few store closures. No, it woke up to a full-scale shockwave. 444 different 7-Eleven locations across Alberta, BC, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and beyond, they're suddenly gone, wiped off the map overnight. No warning, no corporate memo, just dark windows, chained doors, and entire shelves ripped out like the company fled in the middle of the night. And for many of the Canadians out there, I mean, the message hit instantly. This wasn't a business adjustment. This was the loudest alarm bell that the retail economy has rang in decades. Now, what really makes this even more explosive, folks, is what 7-Eleven represents. These stores are built to survive anything. I'm talking about thin margins, recessions, late night traffic drops, even crime waves. They're supposed to be the most durable retail format in the entire country. So when a chain designed to operate on pennies suddenly can't operate at all, it exposed something much deeper, a street-level economy collapsing under pressure. Now, if 7-Eleven taps out, it means that the bottom layer of Canada's economic foundation, everyday working-class retail, has cracked. And that crack is now impossible for Carney to hide. Mark Carney is now being crushed under the weight of his own words. You guys remember how he told Canadians to judge us by our grocery store experience? You remember that? Well, they did, because they had no choice. Grocery prices were still exploding, shelves were thinning, and families are cutting items that they once considered basic necessities. And now, with 7-Eleven collapsing under the same cost pressures, Carney's grocery store benchmark has blown up in his face. Canadians aren't just frustrated, they feel misled. The shutdowns became physical proof that Carney's economic promises simply don't match reality. So while Carney scrambles to explain why everyday life just keeps on getting more expensive, Paul Revere looks like the only one who saw this coming. Now, for years, he warned that the inflation, carbon taxes, and hidden food costs, they're going to crush families and small retailers. He said that affordability would collapse first on the street level, and this is exactly what the 7-Eleven shutdown wave reveals. I mean, every prediction that he made is now reading like a blueprint of what's unfolding. And suddenly, the phrase Paul Revere was right isn't a slogan. It's the national conversation that Carney can't escape. So here's where the collapse becomes undeniable. It's not just inflation, it's the stacked food prices buried inside of everything that Canadians buy. Carbon taxes on fertilizer, carbon taxes on transport, packaging taxes, fuel taxes, tax. Jesus. I mean, come on, right? Can a Canadian get a break here? I mean, the entire supply chain is chained and taxed at every step, and retailers like 7-Eleven they simply couldn't absorb it anymore. Families feel the blow at the checkout, and stores feel it in the shrinking sales and vanishing margins. There's no wonder that conservatives launched the Stop Taxing Food push. In fact, the link is direct: higher taxes, higher prices, fewer customers, and now mass closures. So close your eyes just for a second, guys, okay? If your Medicare plan gives you peace, you'll feel it. Now, if it doesn't, you already know. This is why I partner with Chapter. They restore peace by simplifying your Medicare coverage in a way that actually makes sense. Now, one of our viewers told me after that call, I felt peace for the first time. And I just love hearing that, because this is exactly what this is all about: relief, clarity, confidence. So let me ask you, what would peace feel like for you? Now, most people already know. After calling the phone number down there at the bottom of your screen, or from visiting askchapter.org/Ron, that phone number again is 909-563-8279. And here's what one of our viewers are saying. So Dick said, Chapter got me $100 back every month. I love it. Now, another brutal hit: Ottawa's war on cigarettes and vaping wiped out the single product category that was keeping convenience stores alive. Cigarette sales dropped more than 25%, erasing the only high margin item that offsets the losses from inflation and crime. Now, Ottawa tightened the restriction anyway, gutting the sector's last dependable revenue stream. For chains built on thin margins, this was the fatal blow. When you combine collapsing cigarette sales with surging food prices and inflation, you don't just squeeze stores, you suffocate them. And well, let's just say that 7-Eleven's shutdown wave proves the model has become unsustainable. Now, if rising costs were the first punch, the crime wave was the knockout blow. I mean, convenience stores across Canada, especially in Winnipeg, they reported massive theft, including one 7-Eleven losing over $300,000 in stolen goods. Entire shelves walked out the door. Staff feared for their safety. Many stores, they were faced with locked doors at night, and they had to serve customers through a tiny window, kind of like they were operating in a war zone. The Chamber of Commerce begged Ottawa for stronger penalties, but nothing changed. Carney's critics now are calling it retail anarchy, and the closures prove them right. So as if crime and taxes weren't enough, the essential costs of running a 24/7 store skyrocketed. Electricity bills, already one of the largest expenses for all-night operations, they surged. Insurance premiums jumped because of vandalism and theft. Rent climbed, wages rose, but customer spending didn't increase. Every cost line went up while revenue collapsed. For a business model that's built on thin margins and high volume, this combination was absolutely lethal. So by the time 7-Eleven's parent company reviewed the numbers, the conclusion was unavoidable. Canada wasn't just unprofitable, it became impossible to operate in. Now, another silent killer behind the shutdowns was the collapse in everyday foot traffic. You see, after the pandemic, Canadians never fully returned to their old spending habits. People shopped less, avoided late night outings, and limited purchase to essentials only. That late night rush 7-Eleven depended on, gone. Safety concerns kept people indoors after dark. Add inflation, rising debt, and shrinking disposable income, and the volume-driven convenience model flatlined. So with fewer customers walking through the doors, stores just couldn't offset the rising costs. The chain didn't just lose sales, it lost the heartbeat of its business. And so what makes this collapse even more politically explosive, it's where it hit the hardest. Western Canada, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and BC, they hold nearly half of the country's 7-Eleven stores. And these aren't luxury districts by any means. These are working class regions that keep Canada afloat with energy, exports, and real economic output. Yet, they received the least support from Ottawa. So when the closures swept through the prairies first, kind of sent a message louder than any poll. The regions carrying Canada's economy are the ones that are being pushed. And Carney cannot explain this away. And for many communities, especially in Western Canada, 7-Eleven wasn't a snack shop. It was a lifeline. It was the brightly lit corner that kids walked up to after school. It was the safe late night spot when everything else was closed, the dependable store that workers relied on during night shifts. Well, in smaller towns, it was often the only 24/7 option. I mean, so when those neon signs went dark, neighborhoods didn't just lose convenience. They lost safety, routine, and stability. Streets got darker, foot traffic vanished, and residents instantly felt the void. This was a community collapse, not a corporate one. Now, the shutdowns didn't just wipe out cashier jobs. They deteriorated the entire microeconomies. Delivery drivers lost routes, local bakeries supplying fresh goods lost contracts, cleaning crews, refrigeration technicians, independent distributors, and security contractors, they all saw businesses evaporate overnight. One 7-Eleven closure can impact dozens of workers behind the scenes. Now, if you multiply that across 444 stores, and the ripple effect becomes staggering. Families who never even shopped at a 7-Eleven still felt the hit because their livelihoods were tied to those locations. This wasn't a retail contraction. This was a shockwave through Canada's working class economy. So the 7-Eleven collapse isn't an isolated disaster. It's actually a part of a national retail freefall. So across Quebec alone, more than 550 independent convenience stores, they have shut down in just 2 years. Now, these aren't corporate chains with deep pockets. These are family businesses that survived decades of recessions, competition, and neighborhood change. Yet, even they couldn't withstand the perfect storm of inflation, crime, and Ottawa's tightening regulations on tobacco and vaping, their last profitable categories. So when the biggest chains fail and the independents die too, it signals something far worse: structural economic failure. Now, if you want to understand how desperate things have become, just look at the food banks. Visits have doubled since 2019, with families who've never needed help lining up for hours just to put food on the table. I mean, this is the scoreboard that Carney can't hide from. No amount of political messaging can explain away empty fridges, empty shelves, thinning grocery bags, and children going without. I mean, the same pressure crushing households, taxes, inflation, and collapsing affordability, they're the exact pressures that crushed 7-Eleven. So when both families and retailers can't survive, the economic system itself is breaking. Here's the twist that makes this entire collapse even more humiliating for Ottawa. Canada actually had a chance to control 7-Eleven's global future. Couche-Tard, the Canadian giant behind Circle K, offered $46 billion to buy 7-Eleven's Japanese parent company. Now, if that deal had gone through, Canada would be choosing which stores stay open, which evolve, and how the chain adapts. But Japan rejected the offer, keeping full control. Months later, the closure tsunami hit Canada hardest. So now Canadians aren't steering the ship. They're just watching foreign executives decide which communities get erased. This political earthquake triggered by the shutdowns has turned the Carney-Poilievre rivalry into a national spectacle. Poilievre is hammering Carney relentlessly on affordability, calling the closures proof that his tax-heavy economic model has failed. Meanwhile, Carney's public reactions, tense, defensive, and visibly strained, they're being labeled a panic by critics. The slogan, "Can't afford Carney," it has exploded across social media and talk radio, fueled by real pain at the grocery checkout. And for the first time, undecided voters are questioning whether Carney ever understood the consequences of his policies. So after the shutdown wave, Poilievre's warnings about food taxes suddenly look less like rhetoric and more like a diagnosis. I mean, he's been telling Canadians for years that carbon taxes on fertilizer, transportation, and food processing, it was going to choke households and bleed retailers dry. Now, with 7-Eleven citing rising costs and collapsing margins, Poilievre is pointing directly to these taxes as the smoking gun. The closures became Exhibit A in the affordability argument. Canadians aren't just listening, they're agreeing. The connection is clear. Food taxes rise, grocery bills soar, and businesses fail. Now, the comparison to the United States under President Donald J. Trump adds even more pressure to Ottawa's narrative. I mean, south of the border, convenience retail has stabilized under lower taxes, deregulation, and aggressive inflation control. American stores aren't facing the same shutdown waves or cost explosions. U.S. shoppers feel relief at the checkout, while Canadians face rising bills and vanishing retailers. I mean, even Trump's economic team has essentially highlighted how food inflation can be reversed with targeted tax cuts and pro-business policies. And Canadians are asking the very obvious question: why is Canada collapsing while America rebounds? Well, The 7-Eleven shutdowns, they've become the clearest indictment of what critics are now calling the Carney economic model. This is a system built on high taxes, heavy regulation, and constant cost pressure. I mean, for years, Carney assured Canadians with his policies that they were going to be bringing stability and relief. But instead, everyday life has grown more expensive, more painful, and less predictable. So when the most resilient retailers in the country collapse under these conditions, it really sends a brutal message. The model isn't stabilizing the economy, it's suffocating it. And the shutdowns prove that the failure isn't theoretical, it's happening right now. Now, the most unsettling question that Canadians are asking is simple. What shuts down next? If 7-Eleven built to survive recessions, crime waves, and low margin volatility can't withstand today's economic climate, then supermarkets, pharmacies, hardware stores, restaurants, they may be closer to crisis than anyone wants to admit. I mean, the shutdown wave isn't a finish line, it's a warning shot. This is a sign that the system is reaching its breaking point. And unless the policies driving food inflation, retail collapse, and affordability disaster are reversed, then the next step of darkened windows and chained doors may not be convenience stores at all.